Domenica here from easysewingforbeginners.com. In this video tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to make a nice reversible fabric book cover to dress up any boring or drab book or folder. Don't forget to download the printable PDF which has a list of tools and materials that you need for the project along with step-by-step instructions as well. I hope you enjoy. Okay, so to start this project we need to work out some measurements first. So I've got something to write with. I'm going to use a dark text just so you can see what I'm writing easily. Piece of paper to record your measurements on. I like to use a tape measure because it's flexible when measuring a book, and you need your book or your folder or whatever you're making your fabric cover for. Okay, so to start off with, we need to measure our short and long edges so we can work out the size of the fabric to cut. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to draw just a rough rectangle. Okay, so you know they're my long edges, they're my short edges. Okay, so I'm going to measure my long edge first. So grab your tape measure and just measure the length of that edge, making sure that you get the spine as well. So that's where your tape measure comes in handy because it's nice and flexible. So the length of my long edge is about 11.5 inches. Okay. And I'm going to have a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around this fabric book. So what I'm going to do to allow for that 1/2 inch on both sides, I need to plus 1 inch for my seam allowances. So that gives me 12.5 inches. And then what I like to do, just to give you room for error, is to just add an extra 1/4 inch just to play around with. Okay. Alright, so for my long edge here, I'll need to cut this at 12.75 inches. Okay, and then you just repeat that process on the short edge as well. So for my short edge of the book, it is 8 inches. So I've got my 8 inches, and I'm going to plus 1 inch to allow for the seam allowances, and I'm going to plus another 1/4 inch for just some extra playroom. Okay, so I've got 9.25 inches for my short edge. Okay, so I know I'll need to cut my fabric 12.75 inches by 9.25 inches, and I'll need to cut 2 of these pieces. Okay, and the next thing we need to do is work out how big we want our sleeves to be inside our book. Okay, so we already know how long this edge needs to be because we just take the measurement from here. So we know this one needs to be 9.25 inches, and just need to work out how long we need to cut, how wide we need to cut the other edge. So you need to work out, work out how wide you want your sleeve to be. So my sleeve's going to be about 3 inches, I reckon. Okay, so what I'll need to do is double that for my sleeve, because what we're going to do for our sleeves is we're going to fold our piece of fabric in half just to hide those raw edges away. So if I want my sleeve to be 3 inches, then I'll need to double that, so that'll make it 6 inches. And then I'll need to plus my 1 inch for my seam allowance. Okay, so that's going to end up being 7 inches. So I know that I need to cut 2 of those, one for each side. So I'm going to cut my fabric for the sleeves at 7 inches by 9¼ inches. Okay, and I'll need to cut 2 of those as well. Alright, so I'm going to go and cut my fabric, and once I've done that, I'll be right back. Okay, so now I've cut all my pieces of fabric. I've got my 2 pieces of fabric that are 12¾ of an inch by 9¼ of an inch right here, and then these are going to be my sleeves, and I've cut them at the 7 inches by 9¼ of an inch. Okay, alright, so now I need to piece these together, ready to sew together. So to start off with, you need to grab one side of your fabric cover. Okay, and really important, you need to make sure that this side is the right side of the fabric facing up. Okay, so you've got your wrong side facing down, and got your right side facing up. Okay, next thing we need to do is position our sleeve pieces on top of this piece. Okay, so I'm going to grab one of my sleeve pieces, and we need to fold it in half. Alright, lining up your edges. And then you can either iron this, or if it's just a cottony type fabric, you can just give it a nice finger press there. Okay, so we've got our 2 raw edges together right there. Okay, wrong sides together, and then we have the folded edge on this side here. So what we need to do is put that lining up with one edge of the fabric cover there. Alright, and we just repeat that with the other piece for the sleeve. So folding it in half, lining up those raw edges. Just give it a bit of a finger press, will be fine. You can iron it if you want. And then line it up with the other side. Okay. So here we have one side of your cover, and we have the 2 sleeves here, and we have the folded edge on the insides here. Okay, and then the last thing we need to do with the fabric is grab our other side of our book cover, and this time with this piece we need to turn it over so we have the wrong side of the fabric facing up. Okay, so we're going to place that on top. Alright, so that's what you will end up with, and then we're going to pin this together ready for sewing. So what we're going to do is we're going to end up sewing nearly all the way around the edge of this book cover, but we're going to leave an opening down here so we can turn it right side out. So I'm going to leave an opening maybe about 4 inches wide. Okay, so what I like to do is I like to use a double pin just to tell me where I'm going to start sewing and where I'm going to stop sewing, because so often I've forgotten that I need to stop sewing at some stage to leave an opening, and I've had to unpick and redo a part again so I've got a big enough opening. Okay, so this is where I'm going to start sewing. I'm going to go all the way around, and this is where I'm going to stop sewing, so this part here is left open. Okay, and now I'm just going to place a few more pins around my fabric book cover just to hold it all together on the way to the sewing machine. You can place more pins in if you want. I find a few, it's just enough just to hold it all together. If you want a little bit of extra padding in your book as well, at this stage you can add a bit of wadding or stabilizer into one of the layers as well. I usually tend to put it on the bottom when I'm sewing, but with this one it's just going to be a straight fabric cover. Okay, so now I've got all my pins in place. Alright, I know where I'm going to start sewing. I'm going to sew all the way around, and this is where I'm going to stop sewing. Okay, so I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and show you a few tips to get you started. Okay, so now I'm ready to start sewing my fabric book cover. I've got my sewing machine all set up with my thread. I'm going to use a 2.6 stitch length. I've got my walking foot on my sewing machine, but if you don't have a walking foot, then a standard foot should be fine. Okay, just a normal straight stitch will do. So I'm going to start at my first set of double pins there, making sure it's lining up with the 1/2 inch seam allowance line on my needle plate there. Okay, so that's where I'm going to be looking. If you don't have a guideline there, then you can stick a bit of tape just to make sure that you stay nice and even. I'm going to lower my presser foot. Now I'm going to sew with my up down needle button activated, so every time my machine stops sewing, the needle is going to stop in the down position. Okay, but if you don't have that, whenever mine's in the down position, just use your hand wheel to turn it towards yourself to get it into the down position. Okay, so off we go. So to start off, I'm going to sew a few stitches, so about 4 stitches, and then do a back stitch just to reinforce that opening there. Okay, and then the other thing I wanted to mention, right here with my finger, I can feel where the fold is on my sleeve. So what I'm going to do, just to reinforce that as well, I'm going to back stitch over that part. Okay, just to make it extra strong, because the book cover can be pulled a bit in that spot, so that'll just make it a little bit stronger. Okay, I'm going to remove my pins as I go. So when I get to the corner, I'm just going to have to guesstimate when I'm about 1/2 inch away. And remember, we've got that 1/4 inch to play with. So if you don't sew quite straight or the fabric has shifted, then that should allow for any of those issues. Okay. Oops, sorry. Now, what I forgot to mention is I'm going to pivot here now. So I've made sure my needle is in the down position. If yours isn't, use your hand wheel to put your needle in the down position. I'm going to lift my presser foot up so the needle is down so my fabric won't shift. And I'm going to pivot my fabric 90 degrees. Okay, so I can start sewing down this edge now. Okay, so I'm going to keep on sewing all the way around. Don't forget to reverse stitch over where you can feel the edges of the sleeve, and reverse stitch when you get to the double pins at the end as well. Okay, so I've just gone around my last corner there. I'm going to reverse stitch over where that sleeve part is, and here are my double needles, so that tells me to get ready to do a back stitch to finish off. Okay, and there we have it. We've sewn all the way around the edges, and now we're ready for the next step. Okay, so here's my fabric all sewn together, and I've got my opening here. So in this next step, what we need to do is trim off the corners, and then I'm going to trim off the excess fabric from the seam allowances around the outsides. Okay, so I'm going to snip my corners, and then I'll trim the outsides, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, so I've trimmed the excess of the corners, and I've left probably about 1/4 inch or a little bit less on the seam allowances around the outside. So what we need to do now is we need to turn our book cover right side out. Okay, so you need to find your opening, and you also need a chopstick or some kind of tool to help push those corners out as well. Okay, so I've just got a little piece of down here. This is actually from my turning tool. All right, so I've got my opening, and I'm just going to very carefully just start turning it out there, like that. Okay, and once you've got most of it turned out, just to use that stick to get right into the corners there, and just poke those corners right out like so. Okay, I'm going to do that all of the corners. This one looks a bit funny, it's because I've got the sleeve going that way, so I might turn that one out. Okay, and just one more corner in there. Okay, there we go. That's our fabric book cover all turned right side out. Now at this stage you can give it a press with the iron if you want. I usually would, but just for the sake of saving a bit of time. We have our opening here. I'm just going to show you the next step. Actually I will take it over to the iron in a minute, but I'll just show you this bit quickly. Here is your opening, and we'll need to close this up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold those raw edges in and make them as level as possible with my other sewn edges. Okay, I'm going to take this over to the iron, give it a good press, and then we're going to close up that opening using a hand stitch called a ladder stitch. Now it might sound hard, but I'm going to show you exactly how to do it so it will look like there's no hand sewn opening at all. Okay, so I'm going to go give this a quick iron and then I'll be right back. Okay, so I've given my fabric cover just a quick press with the iron, and I've pressed my seams here as well just to give me a nice edge there and make sure it's lining up with the rest of my sewn edge. And I've got my hand needle here all set up with my thread, and I just knotted it at the end there as well. Okay, so to do our ladder stitch, and just before we start, now I am left-handed, so I'll be working from left to right as I stitch, but you might just need to reverse this if you're right-handed, so it feels a bit more comfortable for you. Alright, so to get started, what you need to do, I'm just going to find a thread right at the beginning of or the end of the stitching there, and I'm going to put my needle under and just make sure it's nice and tight, and I'm just going to do that one more time, and this time put it through the little loop at the end there. That'll just make sure it's nice and secure. Okay, now that I've got that thread secured in there, I'm just going to turn that over so I can do my stitching. Alright, so to do the ladder stitch, what you need to do is just start directly above where your thread's coming out there. Okay, and I'm going to put the needle through the fabric. Now it's going through just in between the fold of the fabric. Okay, so it's not, you shouldn't see the thread on the outside here. Okay, and I'm going to put it through probably about, I'm going to aim for about 1/8 of an inch. Okay, and then I'm going to pull it all the way through, and then directly across on the other piece of fabric I'm going to put the needle through. So just make sure it goes in between or through, just in the fold of your fabric there. Okay, and try and go maybe about a 1/8 to a 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so directly across again. Okay, I'll just do a few of these. Now I'm not going to pull mine tight just yet, just so you can see why it's called a ladder stitch. Okay, I'll do one more directly across. Okay, so hopefully you can see there. Hopefully you can see those stitches. Kind of look like the rungs of the ladder. Okay, when you pull these tight, it just closes up that seam nicely and you can't see any of the thread. Okay, so I'm going to keep going all the way across, doing exactly the same thing. Okay, and I'll see you at the other end. Okay, so now I've sewn all the way across that opening there and you can't see any of my stitches. So what you need to do now, just to hide that last stitch away and that little tail away, is just to try and grab one of the stitches in the seam of your sewing, or a piece of fabric that's tucked away in the fold there, if you can't seem to grab one. Alright, and what you need to do is put your needle through the little loop there. Oh, mine's a little bit twisted, and then I'm just going to untwist it. Hopefully that'll work there. Okay. And I'm just going to pull that. Okay, try not to let your stitching bunch up. So I'll pull that just to make sure it has knotted in there. And one should be enough with this because it won't come undone. Okay, then I'm going to stick my needle through the seam there and just bring it out somewhere from the inside of your sewing project to the outside, and just give it a little pull just to hide that little knot away, so you shouldn't see where the knot is. And then I'm just going to grab my scissors quickly and just cut that thread. Okay, pull your fabric piece apart and there we go. The little tail is hidden inside your project there. You can't see your stitches where you've sewn up your opening, and we're ready to pop this book cover onto our book. Okay, so now we've got our completed fabric book cover, and all we have to do now is pop it onto our book. Okay, so our book should fit nicely into the sleeve there, and just before you put one side all the way on, just pop the other side on a bit as well, like so. Okay, and there you have it. Got a nice looking fabric book cover. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial. Don't forget to download the PDF so you have it to refer to later, and you've got your list of materials as well. Like this project, if you've found it easy and enjoyable, share it with your friends. and leave your comments below. Also, if you make a fabric book cover, I'd love to see what you've come up with. You know, if you do some applique or just make it, add some trimming, some ribbing, just to make it a little bit more unique to you. Okay, so you can find my details on my contact page on my website, or if you're on YouTube, then just check out the description box below and you'll find a link to my contact page there. Okay, happy sewing, and I'll see you next time.